Canelo Alvarez wins a 12-round unanimous decision over John Ryder, retaining all of his super middleweight belts. Now, first of all, the entrance of Canelo was like watching the Olympic opening ceremony. I mean, they really went in. I don't know how much that cost, but it was definitely a pretty penny. Probably the most extravagant Canelo entrance I think I've seen. They had something like 150 mariachi band players or whatever they are. This great light display and some mini documentary playing about Canelo's life and his rise from selling popsicles on the street of Guadalajara to becoming this big superstar. They had all these dancers on the stage and fireworks going off. It was quite the show. Anyway, Canelo comes to the ring. And one thing I forgot to mention in previous videos with regards to the undercard fights on this show is how small the ring was. I mean, it was crazy small. And also there was no canopy over the ring, which gave the spectators a much better view than you would often get with these stadium fights. It reminded me of some of the fights from the 1980s that were in Las Vegas. Some of them didn't have a canopy over the ring. It had that old school vibe about it. Also, with stadium fights, a lot of the time there's a lot of space around the ringside area. Whereas for this fight, the crowd were really packed in around the ring, again, giving it that kind of old school vibe. As far as the fight itself, both guys were very, very relaxed. John Ryder was relaxed backstage, relaxed coming to the ring, relaxed in the ring before the opening bell, as was Canelo. And they got into it straight away, no messing around. Both guys holding their feet, letting their shots go in round one. John Ryder did okay in the first round, but he made a mistake that he kept making throughout the fight, where when backing up to the ropes with Canelo coming at him, Ryder would put his head in the air, pulling back from a punch in a straight line. And Canelo did what you're supposed to do in that situation and throw a right hand, because when a guy's back to the ropes, he can't back up any further. So Canelo was throwing the right hands. John Ryder was blocking those right hands, but he shouldn't have been making that move, that mistake, so early on in the fight. That was ominous to me. And Canelo was also hitting John Ryder with body shots very early on. He virtually couldn't miss against John Ryder early in the fight. Now, in the second round, he busted John Ryder's nose. And you can look at it and say, if that hadn't happened, then maybe John Ryder could have been more competitive. But it happened for a reason, because Ryder's defense just wasn't good enough. He was getting clipped clean with shots, which you don't want to get clipped by from any fighter, but particularly not from a guy like Canelo Alvarez, who does punch hard. He is accurate. He is a good combination puncher. He's very experienced, over 60 pro fights now. So you don't want to be giving him those kind of opportunities so early in a fight. But that's exactly what John Ryder did. And he paid for it by getting a terribly busted nose, which was pouring blood throughout the fight. John Ryder afterwards said the blood was going down his throat. It was very difficult for him to breathe, as you could imagine with that kind of injury. And Canelo pressed forward. He was hitting Ryder with body shots, continued to hit him with those right hands. And of course, as time went on, Canelo started landing the right hands cleaner and cleaner. The right hands that he was throwing at Ryder in the first round were kind of looping. And what experienced guys like Canelo will do is continue throwing the looping shot so that you block it around the side, but then leave a gap down the middle. And so what did Canelo then do in the fifth? Rather than throwing the looping right hand that he'd been throwing for several rounds, he decided to throw it perfectly straight, catches John Ryder, and down he goes. Ryder showed tremendous heart to get up from that. And not only did he get up, but he came firing back at Canelo in that fifth round after getting off the canvas. Ryder had some success, particularly with the left uppercut throughout the fight. That was his best punch, but also occasionally with the right hook. Some people think that Canelo got hit too much in this fight and that it was an indication that he's in serious decline. Now, while I would agree that Canelo is not at his absolute peak now, he's 33 years of age and he's had over 60 fights. I think you also have to consider the fact that not many fighters will stand in the pocket with Canelo like that. They move away and try to keep it long. They're not coming inside trying to force uppercuts on Canelo. And that's the shot that was really catching Canelo most of the time, was the left uppercut. Again, coming from a different angle to an orthodox uppercut. So you have to take into account the style difference here. There's not a Billy Joe Saunders, again, who's trying to keep it on the outside. This is a John Ryder who's in the pocket, trying to exchange short punches with him. And he's a lot more tight in his defense than someone like a James Kirkland. I think Canelo still has the ability to be elusive when he wants to be, and when he's up against the style that allows him to be more elusive. Take a Danny Jacobs, for example. Tall guy, 6'1", 6'2", trying to keep Canelo on the outside at the end of a jab. Canelo has space to see the punches coming. He doesn't have a stocky guy like Ryder right up on him, getting angles for uppercuts. No, he's got a Danny Jacobs, a tall guy on the outside moving around. Canelo can see the shots coming, can move his head. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas Ryder took all that time and space away from him. Obviously, Canelo obliged. He was the heavier puncher of the two, and he was the more skilled, quite frankly. So he was happy to stay in there, take a few shots in order to land his own, and he was obviously gunning for the knockout, which he didn't get due to the tremendous heart and toughness of John Ryder. Now, Canelo did fade a little bit late in this fight, and again, some people are using that as evidence that he's not the same fighter he used to be. But Canelo has had a long history of fading, going all the way back to his early career when he was fighting the likes of Austin Trout and people like that, Angulo. So this is nothing new with Canelo. A lot of it is down to his build. He's very stocky and muscular. That type of build isn't conducive to high volume and good stamina, especially not a guy like Canelo who throws everything hard. He's not one of these guys who will throw a few tippy-tappy shots and then come in with a heavy one. Canelo tends to throw everything heavy, and that's taxing on the stamina. And so while he did fade a bit in the final few rounds against Ryder, I don't think it was that bad. I've seen him fade worse than that in fights in the past when he was still in his 20s. So I don't necessarily see this as an indication that he's near the end of his career, as some people are suggesting. I just think there was the stylistic factor, not being used to a guy being right up on him, a southpaw at that, throwing left uppercuts. It's an unusual punch for him to be dealing with, taking the distance away so Canelo can't quite see the punches as easily as he would if he was fighting a taller fighter. And as I say, the stamina, well, Canelo's never had great stamina. I actually thought his gas tank looked a lot better here than it did against Dimitri Bivol, because his gas tank ran dry against Bivol after about, 4 or 5 rounds? I know Bivol is a higher level fighter than John Ryder, but Bivol didn't really do that much in the first few rounds against Canelo. It's not like Canelo had to come through fire in the first half of the Bivol fight, but yet he still faded very badly, didn't he? So for my money, his stamina was actually better here against Ryder than what we saw against Bivol. Canelo apparently had a hand injury and he had surgery on it. He said he was a little unsure about his hand. I believe it was his left hand. He was a little unsure about it early on in the Ryder fight, but as the fight progressed, he realized that the surgery had done a good job and he gained more confidence in throwing it. That's what he says. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, because there are some people who say that Canelo was having some issues with his hand in the Ryder fight. Anyway, Ryder picks up a round or two maybe in the final quarter of the fight, but nowhere near enough to make an argument for himself on the scorecards. Canelo deservedly got the decision, a UD. He was very complimentary of John Ryder and how tough he was. I'm sure the crowd appreciated it. They would have liked to knock out, but Mexicans also like to see real bravery, and John Ryder showed that. In fact, watching this fight, I couldn't help but think about Ryan Garcia, because Canelo showed Garcia how you're supposed to deal with a southpaw, which is throwing that right hand, setting that right hand up properly, and also those left hooks to the body from Canelo were very effective. Obviously, there's a big difference between Tank Davis and John Ryder, but you can use the same methods to fight a Tank Davis as any other southpaw. Whether those methods will be as effective is a different story. But Ryan Garcia really didn't use the kind of methods, the kind of tactics against Tank Davis that Canelo was using against John Ryder. The way he set that right hand up, the left hands to the body and so on. Because landing left hooks to the head is notoriously difficult against southpaws. Canelo's best punch is probably his left hook. But how many did he land to John Ryder's head? Not that many. It was mainly right hands. So Canelo showed Ryan Garcia how you're supposed to deal with a southpaw, and John Ryder showed Ryan Garcia how you're supposed to behave at this level when you're in distress. If you even want to survive the distance against an elite fighter, that's the kind of heart it takes. It might seem insane, but that is what it takes. John Ryder couldn't breathe. The nose was completely busted, and it was bleeding so bad that blood was going down his throat. And he's got this elite fighter in front of him trying to take his head off every round. And he's still in there fighting him. You know how dangerous that is? It's hardcore. Anyway, hats off to John Ryder. And as far as Canelo's performance, I thought it was decent. I've seen a lot of people saying it was unimpressive, but ever since John Ryder moved up to 168, nobody's done anything like that to him. Yeah, he did get stopped earlier on in his career against Nick Blackwell, of all people, at middleweight. But at super middleweight, went the distance against Callum Smith. Many people believe he won that fight. Got a decision over Danny Jacobs. But Canelo Alvarez, let's be real, smashed John Ryder to pieces. He was landing at will from pretty early on in the fight. John Ryder just demonstrated tremendous toughness, physical toughness, mental toughness, and I think he should be commended more so than Canelo being criticized for the way that fight went. Just my opinion. Canelo says that he wants the Dimitri Bivol rematch next and he wants it at 175. Bivol apparently wants it at 168 because there's no opportunity now for Bivol to become undisputed at 175 because of the decision of the WBC. They're going down the road of politics and all that kind of thing, and they don't want to give Bivol the opportunity to fight for their belt. Canelo says he wants the rematch with Dimitri Bivol at 175. Bivol says he would rather fight Canelo at 168, which is kind of a strange thing. Normally, the smaller guy will be bringing the bigger guy down, and the bigger guy will want the smaller guy to come up. But in this instance, it's the opposite. Bivol wants to come down, and Canelo wants to go up. Go figure. Now, Canelo says that he doesn't want there to be any excuses, not from Bivol necessarily, but from the fans if he rematches Bivol and beats him. And if the fight's at 168, the fans are going to say, oh, Bivol was drained and this, that, and the other. So he wants to go back up to 175 on the exact same terms as the first fight as far as the weight and what have you. Now, some people might say this is very foolish of Canelo, and perhaps it is, but I have to respect it. Don't we want fighters like that? Guys who aren't going to try and drain people? Guys who want to push their talent as far as it can possibly go, rather than staying in their comfort zone? That's what Canelo's doing. I know it's fashionable to hate on guys like Canelo because he has had favorable treatment from officials and what have you in the past, but he's not in control of that. When I look at the things that Canelo is in control of, such as the opponents he picks, I have to give him props. Just look at the resume over the years. And yes, in between fighting really great fighters, there are kind of run-of-the-mill contenders. But that's always been the case. You go and look at Marvin Hagler's career back in the days. Yeah, he fought great fighters, but he also fought plenty of not-so-great fighters. That's what comes with being an undisputed champion. You fight everybody. The fellow all-time greats, the mandatory challengers, the dangerous contenders, the less dangerous contenders. You take on all comers. Now, obviously, with Canelo, there's the issue of David Benavidez, and that is problematic. But again, when you look at the alternative to him fighting Benavidez, this rematch with Bivol, I would say Bivol's a better fighter than Benavidez. So yeah, he might be swerving Benavidez, but only to take on someone better. If Canelo fights Bivol again at 175 and loses, then surely the Benavidez fight needs to happen after that, because why else would Canelo stay at 175? There's nothing else up there for him unless he wants to then go from a loss against Bivol, a second loss, to trying to take on Beterbiev. Would he go down that route rather than fighting David Benavidez? I doubt it, but you never know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Canelo's performance against Ryder. Are you one of those people that, like me, thought it was actually a pretty decent performance? Or are you one of these people who thinks that Canelo is showing major slippage now and is close to the end in terms of his championship run? Again, to reiterate what I said earlier on, I don't think Canelo's at his absolute peak now. I think he is over the crest of the hill. The debate is, how far is he over the crest of the hill? Is he halfway down the hill? Is he near the bottom of the hill? Or is he just over the crest? I personally think he's just over the crest. So leave your thoughts in the comment section below.